Welcome to another video looking at model answers and exam questions for the Foundational Catholic Theology paper. As you can see here, we've got an explain question which says explain from either Catholic Christianity and Judaism or two Christian traditions beliefs about the origins of the universe. Now, as ever, the first thing that you've got to do before you even contemplate answering the question is deciding which option you are going to take. Are you going to talk about Catholic Christianity and Judaism or Catholic Christianity and a second denomination of Christianity? And in this answer, obviously I've got the Catholic viewpoint, and then I am going to talk about the fundamental Christian viewpoint. So what I would do as a simple kind of reminder and a bit of a security blanket in the exam is I am going to cross out the fact that I'm not going to be talking about Judaism, so that when I look back at the question to make sure I've done the right thing, I know that there should be no Judaism within this answer. So start to look at what I've written. The Catholic Church teaches that God created the world ex nihilo, out of nothing, a belief rooted in St. Augustine's Confessions, where he argues that God created the heavens and the earth from nothing. So within this paragraph, I've got creation ex nihilo, which is your teaching. I've got the fact that it comes from Augustine and his work, the Confessions. And then I've also got the fact that I'm explaining what that means. So, source of wisdom, author of that source of wisdom, and then an explanation of what that source of wisdom means. Catholics believe that the world has a definite beginning and that God created the heavens and the earth, which suggests that God exists beyond time and space, meaning he's transcendent. The book of Genesis teaches that humans were created in God's image and God's likeness. Now again, with this paragraph, what I've got here is I've got my source of wisdom, but before I get to my source of wisdom, here I've actually explained what that means. I've used a piece of key vocabulary there to explain the nature of God as transcendent. That paragraph could be written any which way you would like. You could start with the fact that God is transcendent because the universe has a definite beginning, and it teaches that in Genesis, or you could start with Genesis at the top. All of the components are there, and different schools, different teachers will teach a different order, but ultimately, as long as the key components are there, your source of wisdom, your key teaching, and an explanation of that key teaching or that source of wisdom, it's going to be a very, very strong paragraph. Move on to my third paragraph. Genesis is understood by Catholics as a myth. They are open to accepting modern scientific views about the world. However, they maintain that God is still responsible for the creation of the universe. So in that section there, I've dealt with the fact that Genesis is symbolic. I've dealt with the fact that the Catholic Church do not take it, Genesis, to be a literal truth. And in doing so, I'm setting up the fact that I'm going to present the fundamental Christian viewpoint as being very different to that one. So again, that is something to think about when selecting which viewpoints you are going to give alongside the Catholic one. Have you got one that is definitely contrasting and definitely different? And then think about your phraseology. How are you going to move from your Catholic viewpoint into your other, either Jewish or other Christian viewpoint, in such a way that it is obvious to the examiner that they are two very separate, very different ideas. So if we return to the paragraph, the belief was affirmed by Pope John Paul II, who suggested that God could be the force behind the Big Bang. Now again, here there are numerous quotes that you could use from Pope John Paul II. I've opted not to include one because I've got enough direct sources of wisdom here, and then ultimately the exam board are going to credit kind of paraphrased sources of wisdom. So if you can't remember exactly what it is that Pope John Paul II said, but you know that it was along the lines of supporting the Big Bang, paraphrase it, you are going to get the marks. Now, when I start my final paragraph, I make it very clear to the examiner that I am now giving a different viewpoint. Okay, so in contrast or additionally, making sure, however, that I don't turn it into an evaluation point by sticking the word however or on the other hand, and then using this to evaluate that. I'm simply just explaining that viewpoint. So fundamental Christians view Genesis as a literal account. They believe that God created the world in 6 24-hour days, with Adam and Eve as the first humans and the origins of the species. They reject any scientific explanations that contradict Genesis. According to their views, plants, animals and humans were created within their characteristics intact from the start. So that paragraph there, I am paraphrasing Genesis 1. I'm not going through on day 1, God did this, on day 2, God did this, on day 3, God did this, and so on, because I simply don't have time in the exam. But by paraphrasing this, I'm showing the examiner that I know about the importance of the creation of Adam and Eve. I know about the various stages of creation, and that ultimately it was done over 6 days. They also believe in creation ex nihilo, and they see this as God's evidence of God's omnipotence and God's transcendence. So ex nihilo is at the top, ex nihilo is at the bottom, but I've made sure to avoid saying that fundamental Christians believe in that and Catholics believe in that, because then that's not going to be a different viewpoint. So realistically, I could actually remove that sentence from the end of my answer and I would still get 8 out of 8.